Marathon County Executive Committee to order, please. The first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And the next item on the agenda is public comment. I didn't have anybody approach me, and the clerk has also indicated the same. So we'll move on to item number 4, approval of the minutes of the January 16th, 2025 Executive Committee meeting, and the minutes were in your packet. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Drabek and second by Supervisor Mask. Is there any discussion on the minutes as presented? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of that motion to approve the January 16th, 2025 Executive Committee meeting minutes signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Also, just to let the public know that we have 7 supervisors in person in the meeting, and we have 1 Supervisor Fifrick is online with us on WebEx. So moving on to the next item, policy issue and potential committee determination, operational functions required by statute, ordinance, resolution, or policy. And we'll get to item 6B, a discussion and possible action by the exec committee to forward to the full county board for approval. Item number 6B1, the approval of the administrator's 2025 work plan as prioritized by the executive committee. And you have that summary in your packet, and all, 9 members of the exec committee filled out the prioritization, and I want to thank you for your time and dedication to that. And so you see the results of that. Any discussion on the item on the agenda? Vice Chair Dickinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only question I have is the items that are not prioritized, do they become the secondary items on the second sheet that potentially can be moved up like we've normally done in the past? Is that correct?
Yeah.
I think that's a great question. There are some of the things that are still on the work plan that will inevitably get done that are not in the top 3 areas for each. So I don't envision, I haven't given this a great deal of thought, but I don't envision moving them down to the projects to be addressed in future year work plans, but I do intend to reorder them in the work plan document that I present to the committee in the full board, so that you'll see the order of the items that are in the order that they've been prioritized, I should just say. So I'll reorder those. The items that didn't make the top 3, I will simply note that. But I don't think I'll be moving them to the bottom. For example, like I understand the prioritization for facilities-related projects. I just had a meeting this morning about item number 4 in the list, the ice arena, because there are still certainly committees that are walking through evaluating that. But it does give me good insight, and I want to echo the chair's comments. I really do appreciate your dedication to go through this, really to make sure I put my time toward those top priority items. But simply reordering the work plan would be what I would plan to do.
Other questions, other comments? Supervisor Arstead, please.
Under the operational priorities projects, you have 2 number 3s. Is that because there was a tie?
They're exactly tied.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Sure. Supervisor Robinson, please.
I would move that we advance the administrator's work plan to the county board.
Okay, there's a motion by Supervisor Robinson, a second by Vice Chair Dickinson to approve the administrator's prioritized work plan and move to the full board for its consideration. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion to approve the prioritized administrator's 2025 work plan and forward to the full board for its consideration signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We will move on to item 6B2 and the BEAD grant resolutions. And we have the chair of the Broadband Task Force and the recommendations from the Broadband Task Force. Supervisor Robinson, and chair of that task force, and he will give us a little bit of a background on what is taking place and why those resolutions are on the county board for consideration tonight to be voted on in the packet. So, Supervisor Robinson, please.
Thank you. Just by way of background, the BEAD is the Broadband Equity and Access Deployment Grant that is made available through the federal government through the National Telephonics and Information Administration. There's $42.5 billion nationwide. Wisconsin's share of that is $1.055 billion to provide broadband access to those people that are unserved or underserved, and underserved is less than 100 megabytes per second download and 20 up. There's been a long process of developing a statewide plan on how to address this. There's 203 to 206,000 Wisconsin residents that don't have access right now. There's 8,443 in brownfield service locations in Marathon County that are underserved. And this grant application process is done, or applications are due February 25th. The task force has been working with any and all internet service providers. There are 105 in the state. 32 are participating in the BEAD program through letters of interest. In approval from the Public Service Commission. The plan is to try to address all of the unserved and underserved residents in the county, and they're going to do that through the application process. Round one will be for fiber to the premise. And what in Marathon County, there's 113 different project units. The various internet service providers will be asked to submit proposals or applications to cover those. What the Public Service Commission will do is review the applications, and they'll give preliminary approval to a company for fixed wireless based upon cost figures that they've developed through CostQuest, a national firm. And then they'll look at, if there's only one internet provider in that area, they'll give preliminary approval, and they'll negotiate with multiple people. For instance, the maximum state or federal participation is 75%. If somebody is at 75% and somebody's asking for a 60% subsidy, they may favor the 60% subsidy in that area. And then they'll go, if they don't have them all covered, they'll go to a second round, which will be licensed fixed wireless or coaxial cable, which is it's a step down from fiber. If that doesn't serve everyone, then they'll go to fixed wireless and other technologies, including satellite, until they reach all of them. There are anti-collusion provisions in the law that don't allow them to share a lot of information with the committee. We had at our January 27th meeting representatives from Frontier, Charter, Bug Tussle, Bertram, and Mosaic present to the committee. In all cases, there was only one firm in it at one time. We had to balance the federal provisions with the open meeting law, but ultimately the committee heard the presentations. Bertram, Bug Tussle were proposing to cover or submit applications for the entire county. Mosaic, a firm out of Cameron, is looking at serving, or has been in discussions to submit applications for the western side of the county from Highway O West. And Frontier was looking at primarily their service area, doing upgrades on the western side of the county. Charter is still struggling corporately on whether or not they're going to submit applications, and we don't have a formal proposal or concept from them, so we did not endorse them. We chose to endorse three firms: Bertram, again countywide, Bug Tussle countywide, and Mosaic on the western side of the county. And our endorsement carries with it 7 points in the evaluation criteria. We met with them. We feel as if each of those companies has the technical capability to provide the service, and the build-out would be between now and 2029. And we don't have access to the cost information. We have some idea of what their pricing plan will be, but the Public Service Commission will have a lot more information. So with our endorsement, those 3 companies will have 7 points out of 12 community engagement points, and then the PSC will evaluate them on the merit. In July, the Public Service Commission will present their plan to the public for comment. There'll be a 2-week public comment period. We will probably weigh in at that time if there's a need to, but they need to submit the state plan to the National Telephonics Information Administration by August. And we don't know what the current administration will do. There are some rumblings that there may be some changes to the program which could impact the plan and the timeline, but it's an unknown, so we're proceeding based upon the guidelines that are before us today. So all of the companies are intending to bury their lines. None of the companies are asking for subsidies. We have had requests to assist them with utility accommodation policies, and potentially if they need to locate a hub, to work with them on a location of where they might put a hub for their fiber. But there is no financial request to the county board at this time. So we're basically evaluating and looking at the capability of the companies, track records, financing, pricing, to the degree that we have it, and recommending those 3 firms. Again, we did not recommend Frontier because they are only serving or proposing to serve a portion of the western side of the county, and we were concerned that if they didn't serve larger areas, that those areas might not receive service. And I think there were some concerns by many of the task force members about past performance on the part of Frontier because they walked away from the 2022 Public Service Commission grant. So we have the PSC requests that separate resolutions be adopted for each company. We had a request from 2 of the providers to take action tonight in order for them to prepare their grant application and submit it. So that's why it's on for action tonight versus next week.
So with that, is there any further discussion or potential motions on the recommendations to endorse Bertram Communications, Mosaic, and also a separate, each of those being separate resolution for Bug Tussle? Discussion. Any further discussion?
Chair Gibbs, Supervisor Pfeiffer.
Supervisor Pfeiffer, please.
Thank you. Question more directed at Supervisor Robinson. Is there any, so we're looking at 3 different ones. Is there any value, or how do they weigh this? If we were to give a recommendation for 1 versus 3, does that affect them through the process at all?
Well, it would affect the amount of points that they receive when the grant or when their applications are scored by the Public Service Commission. So if we only so for example, if we only endorsed one, say for example you endorsed Bertram Communications and not the other 2, the other 2 companies would be at a disadvantage unless there's a potential significant difference in their cost proposals.
So if there's only
no
one company that
disadvantage for 3.
submits an application, that makes it easy. If there are multiple, and we're anticipating that there will be potentially multiple internet service providers submitting one, then they go into the scoring criteria. Well, they have a minimum threshold. And quite honestly, we don't know how this process will work because it's new. And again, there's the anti-collusion provisions, and I think we're learning as we go. The thought of the task force was that all of them can do the work. I've been at several meetings, including a Towns Association meeting last night where Mosaic and Bertram were there, and I think they impressed people. And we've got a strategic partnership with Bug Tussle relative to their build out with the conduit and the towers. They have a presence. They might, the work has to be done by 2029, but I think Supervisor Pfefferick, the thought is that we don't have all the information, the detailed information. We don't know what the public service will have, but the ISPs will have to submit an application for any and all of those 113 project areas. The likelihood that they will pick one provider in the county is probably remote. And we just wanted to make sure that all of the ones that have the potential to do the work were being considered, and therefore the recommendation for endorsement of all three. And that's happened in a number of counties.
Thank you.
Other discussion? What is, Vice Chair Dickinson, please.
I'd make a motion to approve the three resolutions for Mosaic, for Bug Tussle, and for Bertram.
I would guess.
Supervisor Boots will second.
Okay, Supervisor, just a second. I'm going to ask Corp Counsel because they're three separate resolutions, and specifically, I think they need to be separate resolutions and separate votes.
I think at the committee level, at infrastructure, we allowed one motion for
Okay.
all three. The separate votes really are necessary at the county board level. So I think as long as we do that correctly tonight, we're okay.
Okay, thank you. So with that clarification, Vice Chair Dickinson with the motion to approve and forward to the full board the consideration of the support for the three companies, Mosaic, Bertram, and Bug Tussle, and seconded by Supervisor Boots. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of that motion to approve and move to the full board the consideration of support for the three internet service provider companies to submit applications on behalf of BEAD, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 7, educational presentation and committee discussion. And item 7A, a discussion of Chapter 4 of the Marathon County Comprehensive Plan. We have with us the Director for Land Conservation, Zoning, and Planning, Lori Miskimmons. We also have with us Dennis Lawrence, the Regional Planning Director for the Regional Planning Commission. And we also have a planner from the department, Jeff Pritchard. So whoever wants to take it away, Lori, it looks like you are the first up.
Administrator Leonard says his appraisal is dependent on this. That's a lot of pressure. Okay, so I just wanted to start with a refresher of where we are in the process of updating the comprehensive plan. Right now, we're taking it 1 to 2 chapters a month that we're bringing to the appropriate standing committee first. In this case, for Chapter 4, we went to EED and discussed that with them, and then we'll bring it to the executive committee to get some initial comment and input from you all, and then we'll take these chapters back and try and incorporate the comments we're getting, and later this year, we'll be bringing them all back to you again one more time for additional review to complete a full draft of the plan. I did have a question, I think, from 1 or 2 supervisors. After we leave these meetings, if you have additional comments, how do they get those to us? You should absolutely just email them to us because we're constantly kind of working on all the chapters. So any ideas or things you have, or if you're wondering if a data source has been looked at or something like that, you can just email them over to me and we'll make sure to take a look at that. The draft that is in your packet today includes in red several different comments where we're working on different edits or things we received from the EED last week as well in terms of things they wanted us to consider for additional data or ideas. So I'm going to first start with having the RPC go through and explain some of the data that we've updated, and we'll talk a little bit about the initial issues discussion too in Chapter 4. So let me get Christian a mic. Hang on. Or do you want to?
Yeah, thank you. I'm Christian Belanger, planner with the North Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission. I'm working with Dennis here to update this chapter, and I'll go through some of the data. Starting with just page 1, you'll see just some of the previous plans and studies that we incorporated into this chapter regarding housing. So it's all there. That goes into page 2. skipping ahead to the first data point that I'll talk about real quick on page 4 is housing inventory. As you can see there, we in the county have close to 60,000 housing units. Of that, over 71% of the total housing stock is considered owner-occupied, and Marathon County presently has the highest percentage of owner-occupied units within the region that we compared. Moving to figure 4-2, you'll see there housing by municipality. A lot of municipalities there, so I won't go through that, but it's all there to look at. Moving to page 6, seasonal housing, not a big emphasis because of the lack of seasonal housing in the county, although there is pockets in the eastern half of the county that are talked a little bit about during that section. In terms of changes in housing stock, there has been significant changes over the last 10 years since the last comp plan update. You'll see there single-family housing has grown by only 2%, but does remain the most common housing type. At the same time, renter-occupied housing has increased by 17%, and you'll see there that the 37% increase in multifamily housing has driven a lot of the growth in housing units as well. Moving into housing age on page 7, kind of the same trend that we see throughout the region. A lot of the housing stock is aging. That'll potentially create some challenges into the future, but overall, the county has a pretty diversified housing stock. At the bottom of page 7 there, housing values. As of 2020, the median housing value in Marathon County is $161,000. As we go through the update, there's been some questions about housing values and how things have changed over the last few years. And we are going to incorporate some of the newest housing values, knowing that that's an important thing. So look out for that as we continue to work through the updates to this plan. Over on page 9, there's the housing affordability. I'll just make one note of an error that I found in terms of the owner-occupied with mortgage and the renter-occupied. Over at in the figure, those should be switched. So as a result of that switch, Marathon County has the highest percentage of homeowners with a mortgage paying more than 35%. So that's just a quick note that we'll get that updated. And then the Marathon County has the lowest percentage of renters paying greater than 35%. So just a switch there. And I think that takes me to the end of the data that I wanted to present, so I can turn it back to Lori.
A couple of things on the data that were brought up at EED last week was just asking us to consider looking at some of the American Community Survey data that might be more recent to incorporate beyond the 2020 census data. So we are actively looking at that to see what might be appropriate. The ALICE data was also brought up, as well as, I know Supervisor Marash, you'd had a question about looking at, I guess I'd characterize it as inside the county versus outside, like outside ownership within the county in terms of housing stock. And we're looking to see, we don't know that we have a great data source for that, so, but we have noted it, and we're going to look into see if there's any data available to answer that question. Also, the homeless services section, we know that is rapidly sort of evolving within the county. We put a placeholder to see what would come out of the recommendations from the task force in April. And we've also received a lot of good data from Tracy Durante at the City of Wausau that we'll be incorporating into the chapter as well. In terms of the issues section of chapter 4, so if you go down to starting on page 17, the title fell onto page 16 there, but we have several different issues that we've started to draft out. Some of them are the same from 2016, and some of them are changing a little bit, but right now we have issues being the rising housing costs, just talking about how the costs do remain high in our community, and a note in there to while the county cannot control all these factors, they can continue to examine which policies or ordinances we do have some control over that may assist in bringing some of that more housing supply and costs down within the county. We also still have in there things about housing rehabilitation and also scattered rural housing development. Both of these are definitely dealing somewhat with the idea that we have a lot of deteriorated structures within our county, and especially in our conversations in zoning with our rural communities. A lot of times when we talk about housing development in the rural communities, where they really would like to see some of that focus first is what can be done to raise those dilapidated structures and rebuild quality housing in those areas. So that's a conversation that's come up with our towns from time to time. The homelessness and the growing number of individuals that are coming to this community, that's going to continue to be an issue that the county will probably want to address or be a part of that discussion. We also talked about senior housing and services, that we still have an aging population and services that go along with that. That was another comment that was brought forth at EED, just to make sure we expand the section on senior services as well in the comprehensive plan and what services might be needed for that population. That might be something where we're going to look at it, and it might be best addressed in this chapter. We might also address it in another chapter, but we'll definitely get it into the comprehensive plan update. Another issue we talked about was just planning, maintenance, and coordination, that as we're addressing all of these issues within our community, it's really important that we encourage our municipalities and the county to keep our plans current so that we understand people's visions and what they want for their community, so that when we're trying to figure out how to resolve issues, we can match it with the visions. And so that just calls upon the need to keep comprehensive plans updated, not just at the county, but at the town level. And then livability, just making sure that the community continues to be a place that has amenities to attract different generations to the area. Other points of discussion that we have on there that we've had brought to our attention that might want to be included in this chapter are dealing again with the housing supply and affordability, just talking about those ideas of where county-owned land adjacent to existing sewer and sanitary could possibly be swapped to allow for housing development, similar to what Bayfield County has done. County zoning code changes as we go through the zoning code update with the towns, looking at how we balance rural character with opportunities to create that new housing stock. And then also, I know you're having that conversation currently about deed restrictions associated with the sale of county-controlled parcels. So those are the issues that we've sort of identified related to community character thus far. Again, this is a working draft, so open it up for comments and questions at this point.
Comments and or questions or discussion? Supervisor Robinson, please.
I have a couple or a few, surprising, but do we track congregate housing for elderly and assisted living, and how that has grown in the county? Is there a way for us to look at it, because it is a significant amount, and I don't know if that's something we could track.
Okay.
That whole issue of supported housing. And then, do we have any numbers relative to aging in place? And the assumption is that when people turn over, they move closer to the services. But do we know that? And if you're from Athens, do you want to move to Wausau to be? They're not taking the buses. They may take the elderly handicapped transportation, but do we know how many people really are aging in place? And I think that would be helpful. And I think that there are some opportunities for us to look relative to some of our community, community development block grant outside the city to look at trying to address opportunities in those areas for housing. That's something we could work with CAP and others. But if we could look at that. Are there some, I'm asking a bunch of hypothetical questions. Due to the increased density, the number of duplexes is going down, but the number of larger scale housing units is going up. Does that increase in density create additional demands for services such as parks and recreational opportunities? And how are we addressing that on a county in a term concept of a livability threshold and community character. So can we, does that increase, I think 37, wait, what is it? 37% or a high number of new larger units. What challenges do those pose to the community? And are there some other areas relative to community character that we should be looking at? We used to be, when you talked about rural, you meant agriculture, and now even in the most rural towns, most of the people living there are not involved in agriculture. What does that mean in terms of community character challenges? And I know you address it from the perspective of trying to keep rural, but are there some other challenges associated with that transitioning? The farms are getting larger and fewer. And does that create some opportunities, challenges, or items that we should be watching as we look to the future?
Beth, did you want to add something about land use, or?
To some degree, we have within our land division, subdivision regulations, elements that would address community character and recreational areas within a major subdivision. We have not pressed it because it's not a requirement. And most of the subdivisions that have occurred in the town areas have been large lot residential development. So essentially, the only open space that's required would be stormwater retention areas, and then that's an outlot. It's really not for recreational purposes or swing set or playground areas, play lots. And we also have flexibility in our land division subdivision regulation and our zoning to address different types of housing, major subdivisions that could be considered cluster development, subdivisions that take in consideration environmental features, and different types of densities in residential development within a particular subdivision. We have not had, at least in my 10 years here, any major subdivisions that have sought that or have been constructed and designed in that type of manner.
But to your questions on the aging data, I think we do have some ideas of where we could look for that and bring that into the chapter as well. So
I think leading edge or age would have some of that information on the number of beds in assisted living and nursing home, I think is what you're driving at. And how is that need changing as we have aging demographics in the county? Other discussion, other comments? Okay.
So I'll give out, the other thing I wanted to mention is that we did put up on our comprehensive plan website. We are advertising when we're talking about each chapter and what meetings, and there is also a place for people to go online and submit comments or sign up for updates. So we did give this out at the Eastern and Western Towns Association recently, and I wanted to make you all aware of that too. And then at this point, we keep updating our tentative timeline as we're working with the departments on which chapters we think will be ready next. So I'll give you an updated version of that. Right now, we're targeting public safety and infrastructure for March, but subject to change depending on how ready we feel it is. So.
All right, with that, thank you so very much, Lori, and thank you for that information. And again, I think as she mentioned, always open to any suggestions and discussion on as we continue to move to upgrade our comprehensive plan. And then at some point, once the comprehensive plan is updated, then we will move into updating our strategic plan. So I thank everybody for all of their efforts, and we will move on to item number 8. If somebody would be so kind as to, if they are willing, to make and read item number 8A, motion for closed session. Supervisor Arstead, please.
We need a motion to go into closed session, roll call vote required pursuant to Wisconsin statute S 19.851C for the purpose of considering performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the government body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. To wit, evaluation of the county administrator.
Okay, roll call is required. I'd ask the clerk to call the roll. Oh, do I have a second? Second by Supervisor Robinson. Thank you.
All righty. Gibbs.
Aye.
Dickinson. Aye. Arstead. Aye. Boots. Drabeck. Aye. Pfeifrick.
Aye.
Mask. Aye. Longenhahn. Aye. Morash. Aye. Robinson. Aye. Thank you.
The motion is carried, and I will make a note to the individual Supervisor Pfeifrick and Supervisor Boots that our board rules require in person for closed session, and that you will be placed in the waiting area and will be readmitted when we return to open session. And thank you for your indulgence. And as soon as the meeting is locked and we have
the host or a co-host